All right, buckle up, because today we're taking a deep dive into the world of Voodoo Bear. And no, we're not talking about cuddly toys. This is cybercrime on a whole other level. We're talking about a group so skilled they can reach through the internet and literally shut off the power to your house. They messed with power grids, like turned off the lights for thousands of people.
Yeah, this is serious stuff, not just some kids messing around in their basement. We're talking state-sponsored hacking, nation-state actors. The potential consequences are global.
Okay, so not your average cybercrime then, got it. But why the name Voodoo Bear? It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
Well, no one knows for sure, but it likely refers to their suspected origins and how they operate. Voodoo probably refers to their ability to make things happen remotely, almost like magic. And the bear part, well, that's a pretty clear nod to Russia.
Makes sense. So, spooky name aside, what makes Voodoo Bear different from, say, your regular cybercriminal?
A couple of things. First, they're incredibly sophisticated. They use custom-designed malware, constantly changing their tactics to stay ahead of the game. They're known for using this really nasty piece of malware called Black Energy.
Black energy. Sounds intense.
It is. Imagine a piece of software that can infiltrate and control the power grid. Water treatment plants, things like that. Black Energy gives them that ability.
So they're not just stealing data, they're causing physical damage remotely. That sounds like something straight out of a movie. And speaking of movies, let's set the scene. December 2015, Ukraine. It's a freezing cold winter night, and suddenly, boom, the lights go out for 250,000 people. Just like that, plunged into darkness in the middle of winter. And the cause? A group of hackers, thousands of miles away.
That's what makes Voodoo Bear so dangerous. They bring the chaos of the digital world into the physical world. And what's even more unsettling is it all started with something as simple as an email.
Wait, seriously, like one of those "you've won the lottery" emails?
Not quite that obvious, but you get the idea. They created these phishing emails designed to trick employees at Ukrainian power companies. All they needed was one click on a malicious attachment, and they were in.
And from there, they were able to take down the entire grid.
It wasn't immediate. It was a multi-stage attack. First, they got in through the phishing emails, then used that access to install Black Energy, which then gave them a way to move around the network, spreading from system to system.
So like picking the lock on the back door, sneaking in, and then disabling the whole security system from the inside.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Once they had control, it was game over. They flipped the switch remotely, causing a cascading failure that knocked out power for a huge chunk of Ukraine.
So not about stealing information then, but causing real-world disruption. They weaponized the internet.
And they didn't stop there either. They hit the Ukrainian power grid again in 2016. This time, they targeted Kyiv, the capital city.
Okay, so they're persistent. Clearly, they've got the resources and the backing to pull off these kinds of attacks.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Voodoo Bear has been linked to a whole bunch of other attacks, targeting governments, media organizations, anyone they see as a threat.
It's like they've got this arsenal of digital weapons.
You could say that. And it really shows how warfare is changing. Cyber attacks aren't some theoretical thing anymore. They're a real and present danger.
And it's not just governments and big organizations that need to be worried, right?
Exactly. These attacks have real-world consequences for all of us. Imagine losing power in the middle of winter, your bank account being drained, all because of some lines of code.
You're right. It's kind of scary when you think about it like that. Maybe changing my passwords and finally installing some decent antivirus software isn't such a bad idea after all. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. But it's not enough to just protect ourselves, right? We need to fight back. But how do you fight back against a ghost in the machine? Where do you even start?
It's tough, no argument there, but it's not impossible. Think of it like a regular investigation. Gather evidence, analyze the clues, follow the trail.
So, digital detective work. Who were the detectives in this case?
A whole bunch of people, actually. Cybersecurity companies, intelligence agencies, even independent researchers, they're all working to expose these groups and figure out their tactics.
And what about Voodoo Bear? Did those digital breadcrumbs lead anywhere?
They did, yeah. They led to a specific unit within the GRU, Unit 74455. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice actually indicted 6 members of this unit. They directly linked them to some of Voodoo Bear's biggest attacks.
So they've got names, faces, the whole 9 yards.
They do. But actually proving it in court, Getting a conviction, that's a whole other story. Cyber attribution is incredibly complex, and these guys are experts at covering their tracks.
Okay, but even if you can't always put them behind bars, at least exposing them, shining a light on what they're doing, that's got to count for something, right?
Definitely. Exposure makes it harder for them to operate, disrupts their funding, and sends a message that they're not untouchable.
It's like that game, Whack-A-Mole. You try to hit them in one place and they just pop up somewhere else.
Yeah, kind of. But the important thing is, every time they resurface, we learn more about how they work, their tools, their weaknesses.
So it's this constant back and forth, a digital game of cat and mouse. But there's something I don't get. Why go through all this effort? Why risk causing a huge international incident by attacking a power grid when you could just steal some data and disappear?
That's the thing, it goes beyond just cybercrime. This is geopolitics, international power dynamics playing out in the digital world.
A digital power play.
Exactly. What better way to show your strength, intimidate your rivals, than by reaching out through the internet and turning off their lights?
You know, when you put it like that, it's kind of terrifying.
And it's not just nation states playing this game anymore. The lines are getting blurry. Criminal gangs, hacktivists, even terrorist groups are getting in on the action.
So what are we supposed to do? Should we just log off, go off the grid, and live in a cabin in the woods?
It's not a bad idea, but for those of us who aren't ready to give up our smartphones just yet, there are some things we can do to protect ourselves.
Okay, give me your top tips. The digital equivalent of locking your doors and installing an alarm system.
First up, passwords. I know you've heard it a million times, but strong, unique passwords for every single account. That's crucial.
Yeah, no more password 123. Got it. But seriously, how are we supposed to remember dozens of different passwords? I can barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
That's where a password manager comes in. Think of it like a digital vault for all your passwords. They're stored securely, so you don't have to remember them all.
Okay, that makes sense. So strong passwords, password manager. What else?
Two-factor authentication. Whenever you have the option, use it. It basically means that even if someone gets hold of your password, they still can't access your account without that second factor, like a code from your phone.
It's like a digital deadbolt. Simple but effective. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication. Anything else?
Be careful about phishing emails. That's how a lot of these attacks start. If something seems off, don't click on any links. Hover over them to check the actual URL. And if you're still not sure, just contact the sender directly.
Good advice, especially these days when phishing emails are getting so sophisticated.
They are, which is why it's more important than ever to be vigilant. And speaking of vigilance, keep your software up to date.
You mean those annoying pop-ups that are always telling me to update my operating system?
Yeah, those ones. They may be annoying, but they're there for a reason. They often contain security patches that plug those vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit.
Fine, you've convinced me. I'll update my software. Anything else? Give me one last golden nugget of digital wisdom.
Think before you click. It sounds simple, but it's easy to let your guard down. Don't download files from untrusted sources. Be careful about what you share online. And just remember, anything you put on the internet can be seen by anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Digital common sense.
Exactly. Be aware, take precautions, and don't make it easy for the bad guys.
So we've talked about what Voodoo Bear's done, how they've done it, and how we can protect ourselves. But there's one big question we haven't really answered. We keep talking about Voodoo Bear like it's this shadowy organization, but who are they really? I mean, what are they trying to achieve?
That's the million-dollar question, and honestly, there's no easy answer.
Come on, there's got to be something. Spill the beans.
If only it were that simple. We can analyze their methods, we can trace their code, but their motivations, what makes them tick, that's a whole different story.
So they're deliberately mysterious, almost like they want to stay in the shadows.
Precisely. And that just makes them more effective. The unknown is always scarier than the known.
I guess you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we may never fully grasp their motivations, but they're not the only ones out there, are they? There are other groups, other cybercrime rings, all competing for power and profit in the digital shadows. It's enough to make you want to disconnect and live off the grid.
You laugh, but I know people who've seriously considered it.
I don't blame them. But for those of us not quite ready to ditch our smartphones and embrace a digital detox, what's the key takeaway from all this? What's the lesson for the average person?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the digital world, it's not some separate, intangible thing. It's deeply woven into our lives, often in ways we don't even realize.
So what happens online doesn't stay online.
Exactly. What happened in Ukraine, it's a stark reminder that cyber attacks have consequences in the real world. They can turn our lives upside down, threaten our safety, even shake the foundations of our democracy.
Okay, that's pretty intense. So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
Besides the password protection and software updates we talked about earlier.
Awareness is paramount. The more we understand about the threats, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
And that's where our listeners' interest in cybercrime podcasts comes in. Sounds like they're already on the right track.
For sure. It's encouraging to see people taking an interest, realizing that this stuff matters.
Well, if they're looking to expand their podcast library, I've got a few recommendations. First up, Cyber, hosted by Motherboard.
Great choice. They excel at breaking down complex tech topics in a way that's both informative and engaging. They've done some great episodes on Russian hacking groups, including one specifically on Sandworm, the group behind those Ukrainian power grid attacks.
And if our listener wants to go even deeper into the world of cyber espionage and digital warfare, there's Hacking Humans from Cyberwire.
Another fantastic choice. They focus on the social engineering aspect of cybersecurity, something that often gets overlooked but is incredibly important. After all, the weakest link in any system is often us humans.
And for something a bit different, a more narrative-driven podcast that dives into the human stories behind cybercrime, I highly recommend Darknet Diaries. The host, Jack Rysider, is a natural storyteller. Each episode is like a little documentary, exploring everything from data breaches and ransomware attacks to the rise and fall of hacking forums.
He's got a great voice for it, too. Very soothing. It's almost relaxing, even when he's talking about pretty terrifying stuff.
Right, it's like digital true crime, perfect for a long commute or a late-night listening session.
Absolutely. It reminds us that these aren't just abstract threats. These are real people with real lives affected by cybercrime every day.
So a healthy dose of intrigue, a bit of fascination, and tons of valuable information. The perfect recipe for a cybersecurity podcast marathon.
Exactly. And hopefully it'll inspire some listeners to take their online security seriously, maybe even consider a career in this growing field.
Now there's a thought. From podcast fan to cybersecurity pro, you never know where a bit of curiosity might lead.
Exactly. So stay curious, stay informed, and above all, stay safe out there in the digital world.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the shadowy world of Voodoo Bear, cyber espionage, and the ever-changing landscape of cyber threats. Until next time, thanks for listening.